자, 이제 네 번째 특별 강연의 시간입니다. 올해 포럼은 대전환의 시대라는 주제로 이야기 나누고 있는데요. 어제부터 여러 번 언급을 또 해주셨지만 요즘은 정말 모든 것들이 참 빠르게 바뀌어가고 있는 시대입니다. 새로운 것이 등장을 하면서 이 기존의 산업과 체계를 무너뜨리기도 하고요. 그 사이에서 또 다시 새로운 것이 만들어지기도 하죠. 미국의 경제학자 조지 슌베터는 이런 과정을 창조적 파괴라는 성장 이론으로 정립을 했는데요. 이러한 창조적 파괴를 국가 성장 모델에 접목을 해서 새로운 패러다임을 만든 분이 계십니다. 바로 이번에 소개드릴 연사님이신데요. 마크롱 프랑스 대통령의 경제 자문도 맡으셨죠. 필립 아기옹 콜레주드프랑스 교수님께서 온라인을 통해서 여러분을 만나기 위해서 준비하고 계십니다. 어떤 이야기 들려주실지 여러분 따뜻한 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
Hello. Yes. Good afternoon for you. It's early morning for me in Paris. I will present my research called Rethinking Capitalism: The Power of Creative Destruction. So this relies on 35 years of research to operationalize the concept of creative destruction and create a new model of economic growth based on this concept. So here is Jan Schumpeter. Creative destruction is a term coined by Schumpeter to refer to the process whereby new innovations displace old technologies. New innovations make old technologies obsolete. For example, in his book, Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy, Schumpeter talks about creative destruction. But when I studied economics, there was no model based on this concept. You had the main model was the solo model, where growth is driven by capital accumulation. There was no empirics based on creative destruction either. So with Peter Howitt, 35 years ago, we decided to build a new growth model, which we now refer to the Schumpeterian growth paradigm, which would embody the notion, which would operationalize the notion of creative destruction. The model would rest on three main ideas. The first idea is that long-run growth is driven by a cumulative process of innovation, where each innovator builds upon previous innovations. The second idea is that innovation results from entrepreneurial activities motivated by the prospect of innovation rents. When you innovate, you get some monopoly rents for a while because you have a better product or a cheaper way to produce, and that gives you rents at least for a while until you are replaced or imitated. And the third idea is creative destruction. New innovations displace old technologies. And you can see that, in fact, at the heart of this Schumpeterian paradigm, you have a contradiction. On the one hand, you need these innovation rents to motivate innovation activities. I invest in innovation because I anticipate that if I successfully innovate, I will get those rents. But on the other hand, there is the temptation for yesterday's innovators to use these rents to block new innovation and new entry because they don't want themselves to be subject to creative destruction. So you see, so you have this contradiction. You want the rents to motivate innovation, but these rents will be used by previous innovators to prevent subsequent innovation. And regulating capitalism is largely about how to manage this contradiction. Schumpeter himself was very pessimistic about the future of capitalism because he thought that the first innovators would turn into entrenched incumbents that would successfully block any subsequent innovation. But this paradigm completely changed growth economics because it gives center stage to firm dynamics and to the heterogeneity between incumbents and entrants, between leaders and followers, between small firms and large firms. You start small, then either you are good and you grow and you expand the number of activities, or you are being replaced through creative destruction and you exit. And so growth is all about, and where you have much growth is where you have more exit and more entry and more growth of good firms. And that's what's completely different, between this paradigm and previous growth models, okay? So what we can do is to use the lens of creative destruction to do two main things: to revisit some main enigma in economic history and to rethink the future of capitalism. So let me talk about enigma. The first enigma is secular stagnation. What's a big mystery is why is it that in the US, but also in other developed countries, the average annual rate of productivity growth, here I say TFP, total factor productivity growth, declined a lot since 2005. Even though you have the artificial intelligence revolution, and prior to that, the IT revolution, the information technology revolution. How come with these revolutions that completely increase enormously the growth potential, you had such a growth decline after having an upsurge of growth between 95 and 2005? And the most plausible explanation we found is that, in fact, that's very true in IT producing sectors, that's the black curve, and in IT using sector is the gray curve. And the reason is that with the IT revolution, you had the emergence of superstar firms, and these superstar firms were, Walmart, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook. When they grew, because they took very good advantage of the IT revolution, and they could grow a lot and expand a lot. When they expanded, first it boosted growth, and that's why you have this increase in growth between 95 and 2005. But then what happened is that those firms, through merger and acquisition, became so hegemonic that they ended up discouraging entry and innovation by non-superstar firms. And you can see the entry rate of new firms declines in the US since 2000. And that's exactly the fear of Schumpeter. Those big innovators ended up discouraging other firms from entering. But where Schumpeter thought it's a lost case, we think it's not. It's because competition policy in the US was not adapted to the digital era. Those firms could do merger and acquisition without any limit. There was no regulation of the merger and acquisition. If you change competition policy, as they are doing now in the US, by in particular making the possibility to do merger and acquisition contingent upon not preventing future innovation and not preventing future entry, then you can undo this decline in TFP growth. And that's the hope, is that by reforming competition policy, you can in fact reverse course and end the decline. Okay. The second enigma is the middle income trap. That's Korea. You see, we know that after the Korean War, Korea experienced very high growth rates of per capita GDP. You can see the growth rate. They are very high, but they have declined since the late 90s. You see, you see the decline in the growth rate. And one big reason, and I analyze that in this book, The Power of Creative Destruction, is the fact that you have the emergence of big conglomerates in Korea called the chaebols. I don't know how you pronounce that. You know how to pronounce it. These chaebols were a force of catching up growth during a while. But the problem is that they ended up becoming an obstacle to new entry and new innovation. And the problem is that, here I represent how firms react to competition. When you are an orange firm, you are far below the technological frontier. You are discouraged by more competition. But when you are a blue firm, you are close to the technological frontier. Competition induces you to innovate more, to remain frontier firm. You innovate to escape competition. The more developed you are, the more blue firms you have compared to orange firms, and therefore the more growth enhancing competition is. The problem is that Korea, with these chaebols, the chaebols not only they prevented entry of new firms and innovation by new firms, and you should have moved to more competition, but it took the crisis of the late 90s to weaken the power of the chaebols for a while and to force the Korean government to introduce more competition and more openness. And you can see that here, when I zoom into the 90s, you had a surge of productivity growth from here to here, and then again a decline. But it's very interesting that the crisis had a good side to it. It weakened a little the power of the chaebols, and that not only made entry and innovation by other firms easier, but voilà, that's what it did. And non-chaebol firms could expand, but it also forced the government in Korea to introduce more competitive, more pro-competition and pro-openness policy, which was good for innovation-based. You see, for catching up, it's no problem if you don't have competition. But when you want to innovate at the frontier, it's important. When you have more blue firms than orange firms, it's very important to have competition. Okay, the second part is to use the Schumpeterian paradigm to rethink capitalism. And COVID was a revelator. It revealed the poor social model in the US, but it revealed a poor innovation ecosystem in Europe. Here is, I represent US versus Germany. The triangles are, the gray curve are the US, the black curves are Germany. The triangles are the share of population unemployed, and the circle are the share of population without health insurance. In the US, unemployment increased a lot during the first year of COVID. And when you lose employment in the US, you have a probability of using health insurance. That's why the share of individuals without health insurance in the US went up at the time where you needed health insurance. Whereas in Germany, it remained at zero, the share of individuals without health insurance. So you see that the US was not able to insure the most vulnerable share of the population against COVID. If you look at the Gini, which is a measure of global inequality, US is above Europe mostly. If you look at poverty rate, US is above Europe mostly. But on the other hand, on innovation, US is doing better. Here I look at the flow of triadic patents. The triadic patents are patents that are registered by the US Patent Office, the European Patent Office, and the Japanese Patent Office. Those are the good patents. And you see that the flow of triadic patents per million inhabitants is much higher in the US, it's the blue curve, compared to the average Europe and compared to China even. Okay, so, and if you look at all measures, citations and all that, US is above everybody still. So it's because they have a very good ecosystem of innovation, from basic research to industrial application. So what you would like to do is to have a capitalism that combines the good side of the American model, which is good for innovation, with the good side of the European model, which is good for protection and which is inclusive. Some people believe that if you choose to be more innovative, you have to renounce being more inclusive and protective. And if you choose to be more inclusive and protective, you have to renounce being more innovative. And I think it's not true. You have three types of policies that make you both more innovative and more protective and inclusive. One is what we call the flex security policy on the labor market. I will say in a moment what I mean by that. The second one is education policy. And the third one is competition policy. So first, the flex security. First, I want to show you this curve. It's the US. That shows you the mortality rate, the death rate among middle-aged, white non-Hispanics, unskilled. And you see that since the 2000, it's the continuous black line. That has gone up a lot in the US. And that's what Angus Deaton and Anne Case call the death of despair. You die a lot in the US now because you are so afraid of losing your job. If you lose your job, you lose health insurance, you become poor, you lose status. You are so stressed by that you take opioids, sleeping pills, antidepressants, you start eating pizzas a lot, and that increases mortality rate, which is not the case in France or Germany or most European countries. So that's the problem of the social model in the US. Now, unlike that in Denmark, for example, in Denmark, when you lose your job, it has no negative consequence on health. You can see here, I compare the health of a worker in Denmark whose firm closes down to an identical worker in age, experience, and education in a firm that does not close down. And you see there is no difference as regard at time zero, the firm closes down. And you see that the difference between the worker whose employing firm closes down and the worker whose employing firm does not close down in terms of antidepressants, anti-anxiety, or sleeping pills purchase doesn't change. So no effect of unemployment on the purchase of antidepressants, anti-anxiety, or sleeping pills. No effect of unemployment in Denmark on the probability to have a circulatory problem, and no effect on mortality. Why? Because in Denmark, when you lose your job for 2 years, you get 90% of your salary, and the state helps you find a new job and helps you retrain. And that's why you see, and that's a good system because it makes creative destruction work much better. Firms can hire and lay off, but individuals can adapt from an old job to a new job. So it makes creative destruction much more efficient, but they're also well protected. You see, that's the first policy, flex security on the labor market on the Danish example. The second policy is education. Here I show the probability of inventing as a function of parental income. That's on recent US data from Bell et al. That's on historical US data from Aksigit, Grigsby, Nicholas, and this is on Finnish data. And you see that when you have parents in the top income bracket, you are much more likely to invent. So now I was surprised that should also be true in Finland, where education is free and high quality. But in fact, it's because the higher paid parents are also the most educated parents. If I control for parental education, I see that this J-curve, this J-shaped curve, flattens out a lot. So it means that in Finland, if I control for parental education, the relationship with parental income disappears. But now you might ask, why is it that parental education matters? It matters because parents who are educated, they give children not only knowledge, but also aspiration that make them more likely to innovate. But now you might ask, why in Finland, with such a good education system, parental education should matter so much? It's because the reform of the education system in Finland was very recent. It was 1970. And if you look at the ratio of invention from children who went through the schooling system of Finland post-1970 compared to the children who went through the school, to the inventors who went through the school system before the reform, you can see that the reform increased enormously the probability of inventing for children whose parents are less than the top income, you see? And so truly the 1970 reform in Finland that made the system much more inclusive, it made it possible, much more possible for children born to poor families and to less educated parents to still be much more likely to become inventors. Why is this important? Because in our countries, we have a lot of what I call lost Einstein. You have very smart kids born to poor families where parents don't have the education and the knowledge to transmit to their children. So if you have a reform of the education system like in Finland, but I know that also in Korea, you have a very good education system, not only it makes the economy more innovative because more people can become innovators, but it makes it more inclusive because in fact, the growth process is shared by many more people. And so that's again, education. It's something that makes you more innovative and more inclusive. And the last one is competition. Remember, I told you about the decline in productivity growth in the US, and I explained to you it was very much due to the superstar firms, Google, Amazon, Walmart, Microsoft, Facebook, that ended up discouraging entry and innovation by non-superstar firms. Now, why? Because you didn't have a good competition policy in the US. Those firms could become hegemonic without any bound. Now, suppose you have a good competition policy in the US and you limit the power of these superstar firms, not only it will reverse this trend of entry of new firms going down, so it will make it possible for new non-superstar firms to innovate, so it will increase innovation, but also allowing for entry is a force of social mobility. And in fact, we explain in the book that entry innovation by new entrants is a source of social mobility because it allows people who are not rich to become rich and it allows for a turnover in income. So entrant innovation is an engine of social mobility. at the same time as it is an engine of growth. So I go back to my Schumpeter was very afraid that incumbent firms, yesterday's innovators, would end up becoming a barrier to innovation and growth because they would prevent entry by new innovation, by new innovators. But on the other hand, we know that you can have the state with competition policy. But now we saw that in Korea or in Japan or in other countries, the state sometimes can be captured by the conglomerates and may not want to enforce competition. And that's where civil society is very important. Civil society is a way to check on the government executives that they won't be captured and corrupted by the conglomerates, you see, and that indeed competition policy will be enforced. So what is the civil society? It is the voters. In the US, you had the Biden administration, which was brought about by the voters. It's the media, it's the unions, it's all what makes civil society that denounce, corruption and collusion between the state and private interests. So this triangle, you need the firms to innovate, you need the state to elaborate and push competition policy and other type of policy, green policy, but you need the civil society to check on the state that those policies are indeed implemented. This triangle is the response to Schumpeter's pessimism. Okay, and so I am not a pessimist. I think there are forces that can avert the pessimistic prediction of Schumpeter, that can make sure that you will have sustained growth and also growth which is more inclusive and greener growth. And that's the book you see that I wrote, where all these ideas are, The Power of Creative Destruction. There is a Korean translation that just came out. It's joined with Céline Antonin at Sciences Po Paris and Simon Bunel who is at Banque de France. And that's the book that was just translated in Korean, actually. And there will be another book, which is a book of research, of new research on the economics of creative destruction, following my work with Peter Howitt. It's called New Research on Themes from Aghion and Howitt. It's forwarded by the French President Emmanuel Macron, and it's edited by Ufuk Aksigit and John Van Reenen, who are the young generation working on the economics of innovation and creative destruction. Thank you very much.
네, 여러분 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. Thank you very much for your presentation. 네, 열정적으로 또 발표 수고해 주셨는데요. 짧은 시간이었지만 많은 인사이트 전해 주셨습니다. 소중한 재원들뿐만 아니라 다른 국가 사례들도 또 보여주셨죠. 대한민국의 이 사회에도 접목해 볼 수 있는 사례가 아닌가 하는 생각도 드네요. 고맙습니다.